Hey there. So now here we are at the end of 2024. I can't believe it. And I thought it would be a good time to have some fun and look back at all the devices that I reviewed and to kind of rank them in order from worst to best. So this video, we're going to focus on the 11 note-taking e-ink devices that I reviewed this year. And we're going to say a few brief things about them as we count down from 11 to 1. Let's get on in. Okay, so coming in at number 11 is easily the worst device of all the devices I've reviewed this year. I've even called this basically a cynical release, and I stand by that. And I'm referring to the Pocketbook InkPad X Pro. Oh my gosh, what a terrible device this was. I'll just give you some of the lowlights. First off, it ran on Android 8.1. There's some apps that won't even run on that anymore. It had this curved design in the back, so if you wrote on it, it would wobble. It was sluggish. It was just terrible. It sold for $420. Unbelievable when you think that less than 6 months later, the Books Go would be released at, $380. I mean, it's extraordinary to think about this release in the context of every other device that was released this year. It wasn't all bad. There were a couple things about it that were good. It had a Mobius screen, which of course means it's more durable, and it also lent itself to being lighter, and it was the lightest 10-inch device I believe that I've ever reviewed, but it wasn't worth it. In the end, this was just a terrible release. This might have been the first example of the relationship between Pocketbook and Bigme. Pocketbook did buy out some ownership of Bigme. And so this device, I'm not sure if it came before or after that buyout. It certainly reflects some of the software from Bigme. That's why I think there might be a relationship there. But no matter how you look at it or how they got to this point, just not a great device. And you can now buy it for $300. I still think that's way overpriced for what is a very suboptimal e-note-taking device. Okay, coming in at number 10 was a device that kind of came out of nowhere and it left almost as quickly. I think it literally might have been on the market for less than 2 months, maybe even 1 month. It came and went in a flash, and that's the Rare 2 device. Now, this is another device that was basically leveraging both hardware and software from Bigme. It seemed like Rare 2 was a different company, but that relationship between those two entities was never entirely clear. The Rare 2 wasn't nearly as bad of a device as the Pocketbook device we just talked about, but it did have a number of things going against it. The predominant one was the price. It was priced at a premium when, frankly, it needed to be priced at a discount. It had a lot of bugs in it. Now, Bigme is kind of known for having bugs. Well, they've done a lot of work to kind of make that better. But Rare 2 kind of has a special issue with bugs. It really put it in your face and was hard to ignore. I kind of wanted to like this device. There were a number of positives for it, but the bugs just got in the way. One bug I remember in particular was I had copied something on the clipboard, and then it would always pop and paste itself every time I opened a new note. And it doesn't matter if I copied something else or tried to clear the clipboard. I even rebooted the device. It didn't matter. That bug was persistent. Very strange. It was unfortunate. There were positives here. I kind of hoped they would have just worked on the software and fixed those bugs, because I thought the hardware looked great. It did have the Google Play Store, like a lot of Bigme devices had, and it did fairly well. It had really solid app performance, but at the end of the day, those bugs kind of did them in, and they folded pretty much as quickly as they came in. All right, coming at number 9 is a device similar to the Rare 2, but not nearly as bad with the bugs. And I'm talking about the Bigme B1051C. Just another device in a long line of Bigme and Bigme-related devices that was just overpriced when it really should have been selling at a discount. And this is especially true when you consider, their Notes app and their Reading app isn't nearly as sophisticated as other competitors that we'll get to later in this video. But it wasn't all bad. A lot of Bigme devices have great hardware. They've got the Google Play Store, and they actually do really well, pound for pound, against Books devices in how they do Android apps, which is actually one of their strengths. But it's not enough, really, to kind of make it overcome all the weaknesses of the native apps on the device, and in particular, that price point. So the Bigme B1051C lands at number 9. Okay, so here at number 8, we're actually transitioning in that all the devices previously I couldn't recommend, but the devices from here on out I can recommend, sometimes narrowly for certain use cases, sometimes very broadly, but there's something about the device that I think is fantastic and worth checking out, and that's definitely true with this entrance, the Kobo Libra Color. Yes, the Kobo Libra Color does have note-taking capability, and note-taking is the primary way that I'm ranking these devices. If I was ranking this device more as an e-reader, it probably would do better because it's a really good e-reader. It's waterproof, it's portable at its 7-inch size, and of course it's very light, as you'd expect. And of course you can write and annotate on books. I think the Kobo software on their devices is the best reading experience that I've had on an e-ink device. I really like Kobo on the Android application as well, but on the devices it's even better. The weaknesses of this device is, of course, starts with the screen size. There just isn't much real estate there, and that really does hurt smaller screens. Certainly this one, the smallest of all the devices that we're talking about today. In addition to that, the note-taking app itself just isn't very good. It's really simplistic. There's not a lot going on there. It's great just as a basic paper substitute, but not much beyond that. And most of the devices we'll talk about later have better capabilities. So not particularly great. Finally, the stylus itself needs to be purchased separately, so there's a separate cost there. Overall, again, I can recommend it, particularly for the e-reader portion of it, but as a note-taking app, it's definitely on the weaker side. Other devices can do it better, but still, overall, a really good device. So here we find ourselves at lucky number 7, and here is also another Kobo device, in this case the Ellipsa 2E. A couple interesting points about this before I start talking about the device itself. First off, this is one of the devices that was actually released in a previous year, but I didn't review it until this year, so that's how it ended up on the list. That's the first thing. The other thing is there were rumor mills that this device will be replaced with another device very similar, but with a Kaleido 3 screen color, and that didn't happen. Maybe that'll happen in early 2025. We don't know. But for now, the 10-inch Kobo Ellipsa 2E is their latest note-taking device in this size category. Really a lot of the same attributes that we saw with the Libra Color, but obviously the big difference is that it's black and white, number 1, and number 2, it's got the 10-inch screen size. The 10-inch device is really my favorite e-reader at that large size, and again, that's where the Kobo devices excel. Not so much on the note-taking side, and again, all the same issues as I noted before with the Libra Color apply here. With the basic note-taking app, you've got a stylus that has to be charged, so the note-taking isn't particularly great, but the annotation services on the device are fantastic and definitely worth checking out. So the Kobo Ellipsa 2E is our number 7 device on this list. So Bigme so far has really populated a lot of the devices lower on this list. And it's not always because the Bigme devices have issues. Really, a lot of what drives that is the price relative to what they offer. But every once in a while, Bigme does release a device that gets that balance right. And our entry here at number 6 is a great example of that. This is the Bigme S6 Color Plus Lite. This is an 8-inch device that uses Kaleido 3 color, and what it gets right is its price point is really reasonable relative to other devices in this category with a color screen. It's the weaknesses of Big Me, I think, are mitigated on this particular device. So not only is the price going for it, but you're less obvious the limitations related to their note-taking app and their reading app on this particular form factor. So in a lot of ways, this really plays into Big Me's strengths. And what are those strengths? Good hardware design, the access to the Google Play Store, snappy performance, and apps that work really well on this device. It's not all perfect. Again, the note-taking is fairly on the simple side. It is a little bit heavy for an e-reader, although you get that back with that screen size. So it's a little larger, at the 8-inch form factor. So not perfect, but a pretty solid entry and a device that I've definitely used this year, and I could recommend it. A little bit more for the reading aspects than the note-taking, admittedly, but as kind of a piece of paper replacement that you can take with you, because it is more portable with a smaller size, it's not a bad option. Okay, coming at number 5 is a device from a manufacturer that didn't even exist when the year began. And in fact, it wasn't until July that I even had a sense these people were a company in the e-ink space. And then they would launch a Kickstarter campaign, successfully conclude it, and release 2 products on the market, one of which is our number 5 entrant, the Viwoods AI Paper Mini. Viwoods really came onto the scene with some impressive first entries into the market, very much going after the remarkable market in that their note-taking applications aren't nearly as sophisticated as a Books or a Supernote, but it does offer still a professional and well thought out feature set, much like Remarkable does. But in addition to that, you also have the ability to have apps such as Amazon Kindle, as well as Kobo. I don't know if this has happened yet, but on the other Viwoods device, they've now added access to the Google Play Store. I think that's definitely coming for the Mini if it hasn't already, and that'll give you access to all the reading apps that you might want. Combined with front lighting, the 8-inch Viwoods Mini device is really quite good. Again, a competent note taker, not as sophisticated in its note taking as a Books or a Supernote. Anybody looking for those devices wouldn't necessarily look to Viwoods, but for those looking for the Remarkable experience, I've often likened it to a Remarkable 2, but in a smaller form factor, and I stand by that. The Viwoods AI Paper Mini enters the list at number 5. Coming at number 4 was a real surprise. Gallery 3 was a technology that was introduced last year and only came out in one device, and that device ultimately failed. We thought that we would never see Gallery 3 again in a consumer-level device, and we were wrong. It actually was released this year in the Remarkable Paper Pro, our number 4 device on this list. In addition to color, which turned out to be much more functional than we thought based on that prior device, we also saw for the first time, and still only, 11.8-inch screen, which turned out to be perfect for annotating PDFs as well as for reading PDFs. You don't have to manipulate the size, even with small print. Even though that size and form factor is less than an A4 sheet of paper, it still is readable on this particular device. So looking forward to seeing more devices with this screen size in the future. But right now, the Remarkable Paper Pro is the only one. There were some drawbacks with this particular device, even though Gallery 3 has some technical advantages over Kaleido 3 in terms of e-ink color. For example, has more color options. Some of the colors are more truer than they are on the Kaleido 3, more color accurate. But still, the writing had a little bit of a strange behavior. It's a very expensive device. And the front lighting was strangely limited, although I'm hearing in beta there are fixes to that which will actually make that front lighting a little bit stronger. Nevertheless, the Remarkable Paper Pro was a really solid entrant that no one really saw coming, and that's why it captures the number 4 spot on the list. This is, though, the last device that I would recommend in somewhat of a caveated fashion. From here on out, every device I can recommend wholeheartedly, just as a question of whether it matches your preferences or not. Okay, coming in at number 3, the Viwood's AI paper. This is the larger one, the 10.8-inch device, and it's the better of the two, and it's better by a fairly notable margin. You don't have front lighting like you have with the Mini, but you do have the same software on a much bigger canvas, so it plays much better. In addition to that, you've got the Carta 1300 screen, which is amazing. The contrast on that is great. The device is light. It has great standby battery life. There's just a lot to love about it. Of course, the AI integration is top-notch, and no other device has integrated AI as well as the Viwood's AI paper. But even if you didn't want to use the AI tools, it's still a great note-taking app, similar in form factor to the remarkable note-taking app. Certainly not as sophisticated as Books or Supernote, but polished and really well done in its own right. It has access now to the full Google Play Store, so you can bring on any apps that you want onto the device as long as they work on an e-ink screen. Just a really nice package, again, from a company that we didn't even know about until the midpoint of this year. One thing definitely to note on more of the con side, however, is that the reading app, that is to say the native application where you would put PDF files or EPUB files, is fairly basic, especially compared to, again, Books and Supernote, and even remarkable in some cases. And so it's not perfect by any means, but Viwood's clearly is an exciting new entrant into the market, and this device is their flagship device, and it's worth checking out. All right, we reach number 2, and this is another great example of innovation that we didn't necessarily see coming from a well-established company that delivers really amazing products. And I'm talking in this case about the Books Go 10.3. Books as a line has the most feature-packed native note-taking as well as reading applications. They're easily the most powerful in both regards, and that certainly continues here with the Go 10.3. The other thing Books isn't quite as well known for, but they really deserve a tremendous amount of credit, is they find the right ways to balance features and price, and they are incredibly competitive in the marketplace, and the Books Go just exemplifies that more than any other device. At $380, they made the right decisions, for example, not to include front lighting, as well as others, to come up with a device that maybe has some sacrifices, but you don't feel it when you're using the device. It's that thoughtful in terms of how everything comes together. And it's thin, it's light, it does a lot of things really well. Access to the Google Play Store, of course. Just an amazing device. You can, there's some complaints. It's not perfect. There's a large learning curve to Books devices, for example, because they do so many things. But in addition to that, I'm a huge detractor from the UI of the reading app. I think it's a little bit of a hot mess. But there's no denying, even with that being considered, the reading app is still the most powerful native reading app on any e-ink device. It just could use a better skin, in my opinion. But definitely well-deserving of the number 2 position on this list. Now let's take a quick aside. I was recently on a live stream with the E-Team, and we did a round robin about what we thought the best devices were in 2024, and I interpreted it a little bit differently than everyone else, and granted, I think mine was a little bit of a quirky interpretation, but I interpreted it the best, meaning the most innovative, the one that was kind of the most surprising, and for that reason, I picked the Viwood's AI paper as number 1 and the Books Go 10.3 as number 2. Both really fantastic devices, of course, and they still rank high on this list as well. But if you're talking about the actual best device out there, there's a clear winner in my mind, but didn't have the same level of innovation as either the books or the AI paper. And that's why I had ranked them differently in that format. But what is then our number one device of the year? My number one device goes to the Books Note Air 4C. Now, this is not the most innovative device of the year. In fact, you can make a really good argument that this device should have been called the Books Note Air 3.1C. It was such a small incremental upgrade over last year's model that I basically said in my review, if you have the Note Air 3C, you don't even have to think twice about upgrading. Just avoid it and move on. Your 3C is perfectly fine. And I still believe that. But just because it wasn't particularly innovative relative to the other devices on the list, particularly the last few that I've mentioned, that doesn't mean that it isn't a really good device. And the Note Air 3C, when it was released just a little over a year ago, was an extraordinary device. It also made many folks top device of the year. And there's no reason why the 4C shouldn't also be considered that way. It does so many things well. It does everything that the Books Go 10.3 can do, but it's got front lighting and it's got color. Now, I know a lot of people will say, I prefer black and white devices over color devices, and that's a fair assessment. A lot of these rankings do ultimately come down to preferences. But I will offer the following thing regarding color. Say what you will about Kaleido 3 Color. Some apps, remember, apps are not designed inherently for e-ink, certainly not black e-ink screens, and some menus wash out when you're using a black and white e-ink screen. But with color, that's not a consideration. So actually, from a very functional perspective, a color e-ink device actually can do more than a black and white e-ink device. Anyway, that's my pitch for color. I personally like it more than black and white. Again, I totally understand why people do focus on black and white. It's a very understandable position. But for me, the Note Air 4C, with its amazing note-taking app, its amazing reading app despite the UI, with its great Google Play and app performance, with its snappy performance overall, is this device as light, as thin as some of the other devices? No, but it's still pretty light and thin. The overall package, to me, makes this device the number one device that I reviewed in 2024. So conspicuously missing from my list of these 11 devices is anything from Supernote. And there's no particular reason for that other than no Supernote device was reviewed this year. Believe it or not, I got the Nomad review out in the 31st of December in 2023, so it just didn't make the list. Now, if I had included this on the list, I think I probably would have ranked it 5th. It would have beaten out the Viwood's AI Paper Mini, but not done as well as the Remarkable, the Top Books devices, and the Viwood's AI Paper, simply because of the smaller form factor. Note-taking on a smaller device, just in my opinion, isn't nearly as good as it is on a 10-inch device, and that would have hurt the Nomad ultimately. I think the Viwood's Mini is the better e-reader of the two devices, but clearly the Nomad has the better software for note-taking. And in fact, I think Supernote has the best note-taking software for any e-ink device. Maybe not as feature-laden as Books, but I think it's more thoughtful. It certainly works in my flow as my daily driver at work, so I love it. That is Supernote. I don't use the Nomad as my daily driver. I use the A5X, at least for now. That will probably be supplemented by the Manta, which just got released. I don't think I'll be finishing the review of the Manta, even though I'll be getting it shortly after dropping this video. I'll have about a week to work with it for the remainder of this year. That's just not enough time for me to do a full review. So that review is going to fall into really early 2025. Having said that, if I were to speculate, and it doesn't take a lot to speculate with this particular device, I would imagine the Manta would have been number one on this list. The reason why I can say that with a fair degree of confidence is I know exactly what the software is going to be like, because it's the same software that we see on the Nomad, which is top-notch. And even though I have a few issues with some of the choices they've made related to the hardware, these are really small issues that may not even exist. I may even change my mind as I'm actually reviewing the device. To me, there's only upside available there. So for me, Supernote's really powerful note-taking app with its excellent reference features, its ability to, have quick links on files, just all the things that Supernote does so well. It's just such a curated, professional tool, in my opinion. I have no doubt imagining that it would top this list had I done the review in 2024. But I didn't, so neither the Manta nor the Nomad appear on this list. So hopefully that clears that up. So that's my list. Those are the devices I reviewed in 2024, and that's how I'd rank them. Of course, a lot of this is based on my own personal preferences. They're not necessarily objective criteria. And I think a lot of people will take my first four and they'll rearrange the order. And it'll probably be just as valid of a list as the one I came up here. There are just so many great devices, and there was just so much innovation this year. It really was, had a great time reviewing these devices, and it makes me look forward to 2025 and seeing what comes out then. But I hope you enjoyed this listing, no matter what. If you have any questions or comments, pop those in there. Give me your own lists if you're interested in sharing those. I'm always interested in what other people are thinking. But I'm hoping you join me in the journey now that we've looked back at 2024 and where we're going in 2025. So please subscribe, and I will see you there.